Today's theme is what's the plan for three Eastern Conference teams heading in different directions? The Knicks, the Nets, and the Bulls have different reasons to talk about their plan, and we'll get to all of it today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On NBA, where you can get the latest and greatest from around the association. And yes, you're not getting Jackson Gatlin today. I'm Tony East. I host Locked On Pacers, filling in for Jackson today. And we are talking about the league at large. Three Eastern Conference teams were playing. What's the plan? The Knicks. The plan is to be good. But what are they doing with the back of their roster and why they secretly might be setting up for a trade? The Nets, what is really the plan? They've got some good vets, and yet they're trying to stink. And the Bulls have Levine and Lonzo and Vucevic, and they're trying to trade them and maybe not be very good, but also those guys are good. What's going on here? We're going to figure it out with the hosts from those shows. Hayes from Locked On Bulls, Adam Armbrecht from Locked On Nets, and Gavin Shaw from Locked On Knicks will join us all to talk about it. Thanks for making us your first listen here on Locked On NBA today. Your second listen could be any one of our wonderful NBA channels. I would recommend Locked On Cavs to hear more about Jared Allen and his 3-year, $90+ million extension. And today's show brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now let's talk the plan for the Knicks, the Bulls, and the Nets. Mikal Bridges no longer. The Brooklyn Nets have totally pivoted, one of the lowest over-unders, if not the lowest in the NBA. And yet, as reported in the New York Post by Mr. Brian Lewis, ownership in Brooklyn has absolute confidence in Sean Marks and the front office in Brooklyn. No one better to talk about the Nets in their direction than Adam Armbrecht from Locked On Nets. Adam, what do you think of that statement from ownership, and what is the Nets' direction? They had quite the summer of moving pieces around.
Just a team moving and shaking in the NBA landscape, ready to really seize their future here after what has been, I think, smooth sailing over the last few seasons. Listen, when having full confidence in the front office, in theory, you can say that makes sense because Sean Marks was the GM at the time when they grabbed reclamation projects like Joe Harris and like Spencer Dinwiddie and took on bad contracts and then built it up and made an attractive spot to get Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and on you go. The flip side of that is that everything after that had a lot of missteps, had, high level failures and mistakes that got made. So, if you're steady as you go and you believe this team is full committed to the rebuild now, then having, confidence in the front office is kind of an easy statement to make when the confidence level is set at 19.5 win total. And let's make sure that we're confident we get one of the top picks in next year's draft class.
I think it's an easy and smart statement for an owner to make when I think you nailed the point to make of the last time the Nets were in a spot like this. They get Karis LeVert by dumping Thad Young. They trade Brook Lopez to get other first rounders. All of a sudden, they have D'Angelo Russell and Jared Allen, and this team is spunky and fun and in the playoffs and exciting. And you could say they rushed it. Every team in the NBA would have signed Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving if given the chance. But Sean Marks has shown that he can do this from a situation of, and this isn't even weakness. They got their picks back. They have a ton of stuff. But from a situation of going from low to high fairly quickly and identifying talent, he has shown that. What do you think he did so well that time that they can replicate now? And what lessons did they learn from that rebuilding process the first time?
Yeah, I'll go lesson-based first here. Head coach really matters. I don't want to shock anybody here. It's not just about having the best talent, though that's critical. Get your superstars and you have a much better chance. But over the life cycle of the superstar era, if you want to call it that, in Brooklyn, having, you let go Kenny Atkinson. He did a good job. Maybe some people would argue he gets a little bit overhyped being a part of the rebuild process there with the young team and the scrap heap team. But then you go to Steve Nash. That's not the answer to your problem. Someone with no experience coming in the door. You go back to a familiar face in Jacques Vaughn, but not someone that you would say is ready to lead this team maybe forward. When you turn it over to a guy like Jordy Fernandez, who by all accounts was a sought-after coach around the league. He's coaching the Canadian team in the Olympics now.
He's crushing it in the Olympics right now.
100%, right? Takes on Spain the other day and fends them off. Like, they are accomplishing things, and they're doing a lot of great stuff when it comes to the defensive end of the court too. So you want to build an identity. You want to have a coach that's maybe the right demeanor, the right age to be coming into a rebuild process and say, you can be here 3-4 years from now when we're really ready to win. That's a good thing. Mistakes that were made, you can, I mean, and they also took on bad contracts in a good way. Timothy Mozgov, you say getting peak value for some players you're going to move off of. Jared Allen, very good NBA player. I don't think you look back and say, oh no, I can't believe we didn't hold on to Jared Allen or to player X, Y, or Z, Karis LeVert as well. So there's no real missteps there. I think the misstep was not necessarily assessing what your roster was going to be in support of your superstars and making sure that you had a clear path. And I think that that's true about the NBA overall. When you get the superstars, it used to be the model of we'll get all these plug and play vet minimum guys, but they have clear ceiling caps, whether it's the Blake Griffins of the world, whether it's going to be the LaMarcus Aldridge, right? Sometimes you got to find a way to manage the money to bring in some of those more key contributors. And biggest mistake I know Nets fans would want me to bring up is not utilizing Cam Thomas early enough in his career to give the value. And who knows what that could have meant. We pushed back on it. There's a lot of development there, but I think, star maybe in the making as fans want to look at him. Make sure you use the talent you have. Don't bury some of those players just because you get star driven.
It is tough to develop Cam Thomas on a Kevin Durant team, but after Kevin Durant, they did not hit the accelerator hard enough, I think, to most fans liking the Cam Thomas experience. But that's what this year will be all about, right? Taking in Zaire Williams. They didn't do a ton in free agency because why would they add talent, right? They're supposed to be trying to prioritize the draft, which is why they got their own picks back, all that sort of stuff. And we will, in a second, talk about their direction for this year, but call me an optimist, Adam, but okay. I look at Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton, and Cam Thomas, like you said, budding star. Is that really the worst team in the NBA? How did the Nets accomplish this goal of trying to maximize this coming draft?
So here's the difference, right? Because you go back to this past season and you say, and Mikal Bridges is gone. Now, some Nets fans are ready to kick him out the door. Didn't have a great year. Get an amazing haul, obviously. Take back some bad contracts. Bogdanovich coming back in the door. We got Killian Hayes, just in case anyone's wondering. That's going to be a big factor here.
Sorry if Killian Hayes is listening that I laughed when you said that.
Don't look past Killian Hayes. But here's the difference from last year to this season upcoming. Last year, whether you agreed or not, the Nets were selling the bill of goods that we are going for the playoffs. We want to make the play-in tournament. That matters to us. We have Mikal Bridges. We have Cam Johnson, a lot of veterans, Dorian Finney-Smith, etc. Okay, that's the goal. That's the agenda. When you come into a year when you do not want to win, when you want to be as close to the top of the draft to get Cooper Flagg or any other number, by the way, because it's a very rich draft class, as everyone knows.
Top 4, top 5, all awesome.
Yeah, listen, by the way, local product here in New Jersey. I'll be watching guys at Rutgers, 2 of them considered to be in the top 5 as well. The difference is you can control it. So when you say names like, oh, you still have Cam Johnson, right? Well, Cam Johnson, even though he has injury concerns as well, he doesn't need to play 30-plus minutes a game. Maybe he plays 20 a lot of nights. Maybe he plays 15 some nights. Dennis Schroeder's been a guy that when he's on a team and contributing, even with the Nets when he came over last season, played 30-plus minutes immediately. We can go ahead and dial those back, right? You can give the reps and the minute shares to a lot of younger players that you want to get looks at. Jalen Wilson, MVP of the Summer League in Vegas this season. Hey, you want to see him continue to develop. Dorian Finney-Smith. Whether or not these guys are definitely going to be here day one, the clear understanding that the organization is ready to move forward with a full rebuild tells the veterans to go ahead and lower your expectations. So that's the way I think you walk in this door. Guess what? Killian Hayes, get out there for a couple of games. We don't want to risk messing up our win totals. And I just don't think when you look at this roster and the landscape of the NBA and teams that were tankers maybe a year ago or bottom feeders, there's a lot more competition going into this season. So the Nets are kind of going the quote unquote wrong way at the right time if you want to spike a high draft pick.
Definitely true. And though you could have just said, well, they stunk last season and traded away Mikal Bridges. Obviously, they're not going to be very
32 and a half. It's like, where do you want to set this win total? Let's be realistic here, right?
Yeah, maybe I'm too pilled by their, 14-14 first 2 months where it's like, oh, this is a cool team. This all makes sense. But you're absolutely right about that. And the moves they've made make their direction so obvious. So how does it actually go this season? If those guys aren't playing much, like Cam Thomas rolls his ankle, he's going to miss well over the expected number of games, or Cam Johnson, excuse me, 2 camps. Going to miss well over the expected number of games. Oops. Oh no. What does that look like? A lot of Cam Thomas. Who else do you expect to see heavily featured in Brooklyn this year?
I do expect at some point, we've talked about this, whether or not Jalen Wilson coming again off the summer league, is he deserving of, should he be starting day one? It's fine to keep Cam Johnson in front of him, but I expect that transition to happen over the course of the season. So you'll see more Jalen Wilson, who becomes potentially another kind of second round gem in the Sean Marks era. They haven't had a lot of draft picks, but when they've had them, they've done a pretty good job with them. Dorian Finney-Smith's going to clear out of the way. I think I would want Noah Clowney to be starting day one for this team. Came up late in the year. Yeah. You have to put him into that conversation as well. So you move him into the starting rotation almost immediately. Dorian Finney-Smith gets very much buried. I don't know if Bogdanovich sees the court, let alone if he's even on this roster. So the youth movement happens here. I don't have the same impetus to say day one it needs to be, and people are a big fan of what Keon Johnson has shown in summer league as well for the Nets. I'm not talking about a Cam Thomas and Keon Johnson backcourt, right? But there's never a hesitation to go in that direction and to find those opportunities to develop those players. Losses can show value if you see player development from key figures here. And Cam Thomas, frankly, the biggest question people talk about is Jordi Fernandez going to go ahead and give him point guard responsibilities and see if he can grow into that role more? Those are things that you can sacrifice games and not put it back on young players to say your mistakes are going to cost you reps and cost you minutes. That won't be this season. You'll actually maybe get rewarded for being willing to take the chances and show that you're growing over the course of the year. So I expect youth, even if you let some of those vets stand in your way. I always bring them up because you have to. I don't know what happens with Ben Simmons. Let me just be clear.
I was going to get there.
There you go. Feel free to tee me up, Tony.
Just don't even have to. Yeah, I expect February 20th. The rotation is something like Claxton, Clowney, Keon Johnson, Day'Ron Sharp, Cam Thomas, Trendon Watford, Dariq Whitehead, Zaire Williams, and Jalen Wilson, or maybe a few veterans mixed in. There's something like that. You got to it.
Yeah.
Ben Simmons. What is he going to play? Like, it's expiring. So, like, in theory, that makes it better, but still it has no value. And there's not that many bad contracts anymore. How does this actually shake out to you?
Again, this is the benefit of a rebuild. Once you get into the rebuild, it no longer matters. Just like it mattered so much when you traded James Harden to Philadelphia and got back Ben Simmons, it mattered that he came in and got healthy and contributed. Didn't work out. The next year, it still mattered. Lesser importance, but you say, oh, if we want this to be a good year and make the playoffs, if Ben Simmons can help accomplish that goal, it matters. I do not think he should be in the starting lineup if he's 100% healthy coming into this season. If you tell me that he only gets 15 to 20 minutes a night, it's fine. You are what you are. You're an expiring contract. You're not a part of the long term here. And a lot of people talk about dumping him or, swapping it out. Would you ever have value? I can't foresee a world where he has any of that for another team. So he's just a part of your cap floor, and you get through this year, you clear it off the books, and you move forward from him. I will be, you'll hear it on the podcast, fairly disgusted if the Brooklyn Nets are investing any amount of time in Ben Simmons that takes away from other players, like you mentioned, a Trendon Watford, from getting real minutes here and showcasing what they can be. Guys 20 to 25 years old that can be a part of the supporting cast going forward.
Yeah, the trade deadline's February 6th. If Ben Simmons is not a buyout candidate on February 7th, I would be a little surprised given where this is. The only contract that makes sense as a trade candidate for Ben Simmons is Beal, and that's not going to happen. That just doesn't make sense for either team. So it's kind of just how this is. And if you want more on the Nets, all these young players we're talking about, Ben Simmons, their mixture of veterans, Adam Armbrecht, Doug Norrie, will have more on Locked On Nets. What's coming there this week, Adam?
We are going into Monday's episode, minutes breakdown, projecting the starting lineups, our rotations, and where we want to see those minutes go. So you can go ahead and see where Doug and I differ on that and where maybe we agree, Ben Simmons, on who should not be seeing a big share of the court.
Go check it out on Locked On Nets.